Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityoramamritam Gamaya Aviramaedhi Rudrayate Dakshinang Te Namam Bahinityam Om, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality. Reach us through and through ourself, and evermore protect us from ignorance by thy sweet, compassionate face. Let us sit quietly a few moments and meditate on the Supreme Spirit in any way we please. Bhadrang karnebi shrunuyama devaha Bhadram pasyemakshbhiryajatraha Sthirarangaye stushtvagam sastanuvihi Vyasema eva hitam yadayu Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we hear with our ears what is auspicious. May we see with our eyes what is auspicious. May we enjoy with strong limbs and bodies the life allotted to us. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all. Shanti Ashrama and Swami Turiyananda. So the history of this society, this Vedanta society, of course, started in the time of Swami Vivekananda, when Swami Vivekananda was in San Francisco from February 22nd to until sometime in early June or the end of May 1900. So on April 14th, this Vedanta Society was formed. The people who had listened to the lectures of Swami Vivekananda had asked him for his opinion on whether they could form a class, a Vedanta class, because Swamiji had told him that he would have to leave the Bay Area and eventually go back to India, and so there was no way that he could stay and continue to lead the society. But the devotees were very anxious that it should be continued. So they formed a society and they decided to organize in this fashion, and they asked the Swami to send another teacher. So he said, I will send to you one who lives what I merely talk about. Of course, that was his own humility, because he certainly was the embodiment of that which he taught. But he phrased it this way: I will send you someone who lives what I talk about. I will send you Swami Turiyananda. Now, Turiya is the fourth state. That is to say, we have a waking state for a certain amount of time each day, then we have a sleeping or a dreaming state, and then we have this, what is called the deep sleep state. Those are three states of our existence. Every day we go through that routine from one to the other. But the fourth state is Turiya. It's simply said it's the fourth without describing what it is, because it's beyond description. It's a state in which that ultimate reality that is only dimly perceived, or perhaps not really thought to be perceived at all, in that state that is the reality. So this was the name given to him. Actually, probably Swami Vivekananda himself may have given him that name. So his emphasis was on the Turiya, on that ultimate reality, which is not a state, but really is beyond all states. It's the eternal consciousness. Time itself vanishes, space itself vanishes. So that was the name that was given to him because that was his nature. Swami Vivekananda gave these names to the direct disciples in conformity with their ideals, but in conformity also with their own inner tendencies. So anyway, this was Swami Turiyananda's basic nature, that he wanted to go to the most fundamental, to the most essential, and not be bothered too much about the details of the road that one goes from one state to another to finally, hopefully, become aware of that which was always present. That Turiya is not the fourth state in the sense that you have to go 1, 2, 3, and then 4. The point is there is nothing but Turiya. There is only that reality. But because we're not seeing it completely, we're not seeing it properly or fully, we see it sometimes as the waking state. We see things that are made up of the elements. We think of our thoughts, which are not material, but which are very real and very significant to us, and occupy generally the time that we don't spend with consciousness of the exterior. We are conscious of that world of thought. But this is, at the same time, the reality is not that. The reality is, this is only partly reflected in this visible world. It is only partly reflected in our thoughts and in our consciousness. It is partly reflected in all the different states that we go through. But it is not, it is only dimly intuited. It is not really clearly seen in any sense. But Turiya, the one who has dedicated himself or herself to that, is committed to that which does not change. And that is a new thought generally in philosophy, that is a new idea. New in the sense it's as ancient as the hills, but it's new in terms of being recognized philosophically in all parts of the philosophical realm, you could say. That there is a reality which does not change. Everything in our experience constantly changes. So we say, how is it possible that there could be something which doesn't change? Our bodies change, our psychology changes, our mind changes, our ideals change, everything seems to change. Change is the one common, what is common to every experience, you could say, what is common to every experience is that it changes. Whatever it is now, it is not going to be that way forever. But at the same time, the message of religion, and that is true of all religions, is that there is a fundamental reality which does not change. They give it different names. It is God, it is the Spirit, it is the infinite and eternal. It is called Jesus and Buddha and the Krishna and Rama. And Ramakrishna, anyone who knows, who has experienced that reality, has actually become that reality. Brahmavid Brahmaeva Bhavati, the knower of Brahman actually has realized that he or she is Brahman. That is the essence. At the heart of our consciousness, there is something which does not change. That is the method really of all religions. It's given different names in different traditions, but that is the basic idea. There is deep down at the very core, at the very center of our existence, there is a reality which does not change, and every religion makes this claim that if you actually experience that reality, or know that you are that reality, or however you want to put it in words, you have touched something that is eternal and totally satisfying. And all craving is fulfilled, all desire is fulfilled in that experience. So that is what is given the name Turiya. Now, Swami Turiyananda was the very embodiment of that. But the second part of our subject is Shanti Ashrama. Now, what is this Shanti Ashrama, and what is the reason that we're discussing it? There was, when Swami Vivekananda was in the United States, and specifically in this case in New York, there was a discussion in New York among the people who were interested in the teachings of Vedanta, that there should be a place where people could go from time to time, or those who were able would actually move to that place and spend their time exclusively in spiritual practices. And what spiritual practices? In the attempt to realize the infinite and the eternal. So this discussion was brought about by one particular incident, and for one particular reason that it was brought up at that time. There was in New York a young man named Cornelius Hebblom. He was from Holland, and he had emigrated to the United States. He had been looking for spiritual significance, for spiritual sustenance. He had met, by that time when this was going on, Swami Vivekananda had returned to India after his first trip to the West, and he had sent one of his brother disciples, Swami Vedananda, to New York to conduct the work there. And this young man had heard the teachings, the lectures of Swami Vedananda, and he did meet Swami Vivekananda when Swami came on his second trip to the West. Anyway, this young man wanted to put into practice what had been taught as theory. And that is, where we all get uncomfortably involved. We can acknowledge, yes, this is a wonderful theory, this is absolutely excellent, this is what I want to follow, but I'm doing all these other things, I'm involved in all these other situations, and so for me it will be just a matter of studying the lectures, studying the teachings, practicing as I can find the time, a little bit now, a little bit then, in trying to achieve this goal that is spoken of in religion. And is spoken of in all religions. Every religion has I would say, a systematic approach to enable people to realize the goals that that religion talks about. And in certain traditions, it's these people devote themselves entirely to that, and they are called monks and nuns. And some of the Christian orders, of course, some of the Christian different schools of thought have established monasteries and convents, and so have the Buddhists and the Hindus also. Others may not necessarily have established formal organizations, but there will be people in every religion that will want to spend their whole time in a dedicated pursuit of the ideals of that religion, and though they may not formally be associated with an institution like a monastery or a convent, they will nevertheless intensely and in a very dedicated way spend their energy and concentration on trying to realize and achieve that. Anyway, this young man was extremely anxious to put these ideas into practice. There were some institutions in the upper part of New York State at that time. One of them was called the Lord's Farm. It was a Christian institution, and there always have been organizations like the Mennonites and others who have tried to make that pursuit of spiritual ideals a full-time endeavor, not just on Sundays, not just when they come home from their work in the evenings or in the early mornings, but actually spending their time as much as possible in the 24 hours to try to realize these ideals. Anyway, this young man's need for great interest, great dedication to find such a place was being discussed in those people who had assembled in the Vedanta Society of New York, which Swami Vedananda had founded in 1894. And so there was one of them, one of those people was actually from California. Her name was Minnie Book, I think B-O-O-C-K-E, I think was the spelling. Anyway, she said that her father had been very useful in some of the work of the federal government, and the government had given him a land grant in California, 160 acres. The government used to do that sort of thing. It would give away land. The idea was to encourage settlement of the West. And people were given land, and they didn't actually have to pay money for it, but they may have done something for the federal government to be awarded this, but they didn't have to pay any money, as you might say, up front for it. But they had to commit themselves to spend at least a certain amount every year to maintain it. That is, and I think that the amount was something like $160 or so. Of course, $1 was worth much more than it is worth these days. Anyway, they were asked to, required to spend a certain amount of time, money each year to maintain the place. Anyway, her father had done this beneficent deed for the government in some way, and so he was issued this 160 acres. Now, in those days, there wasn't any question of exactly mapping out, you get this much, this is your boundary. They simply took a map and said, okay, in this place they drew 4 straight lines. what's within those straight lines is your property. Whether there were mountains there or impassable areas didn't matter very much, but everything was laid out that way. The idea is there was no need to be so formal because there were so few people there. Anyway, this land was issued to this lady's father, and she herself had been there and stayed for some time, from time to time, probably as a vacation place. There was a cabin on the land, a cabin and maybe 2 cabins. And so she volunteered to give that land to Swami Vivekananda for the start of an ashrama. The whole thing seemed to be so wonderful, such a great idea that there should be a place where people could put into practice that which was taught in theory in the lectures and classes. And so she offered that land to Swami Vivekananda and for the building up of an ashrama, a place of spiritual retreat. Swami was delighted and he accepted it. And he asked one of his fellow disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, whom he had brought to the West on his second trip, he asked him to go to California and establish that ashrama because he knew that Swami Turiyananda would establish it in the traditional way. Now, initially, even to come to the West, Swami Turiyananda had objected. Swami Vivekananda had asked him to come to the West during his second trip, so the two of them came together on the ship. And of course, it took several weeks to travel from India they went to England and back, and then to the United States. At that time, Swamiji told Swami Turiyananda that it is the Divine Mother's will that you go to the West. That means it is that spiritual entity who is the source, the essence, who is the divinity that is at the core of reality. That was Sri Ramakrishna referred to. That was the mother that Sri Ramakrishna worshipped. That was the principle of spirituality, all-encompassing spirituality that Sri Ramakrishna himself embodied. And Sri Ramakrishna heard that communication from that reality, and so it was known that Sri Ramakrishna would get these messages, you could say. Anyway, Swami Turiyananda told Swamiji, well, you say it's the Divine Mother's will that I go to the West. Why don't you rather say it is your will? Because you probably have not heard any particular divine command in this matter. And of course, Swamiji became very serious. No, I have experienced this. So Swami Turiyananda gave in and came to the West. The same situation went on coming to California. Swami Turiyananda was told in the Divine Mother's will that you start this ashrama in California. So the Swamiji had experienced it and he told him that. Again, Swami Turiyananda said, brother, why not say it is your will? I mean, that is all right, say it is your will that I go to California. Surely you have not heard the mother's words in this matter. No. Swamiji again told him, no, brother, when your mind becomes a little pure, you also will be aware of the reality of the mother's presence and hear those words. Now, Swami Turiyananda, to ask him to achieve greater purity than he manifested is really is beyond the stretch of our imagination, because when one reads the story of his life, he was the essence of spirituality. He was the essence of total commitment to spiritual reality. From his very boyhood, he had immersed himself in the study of the Bhagavad Gita. And so he was, Sri Ramakrishna himself described him as a spiritual aspirant of the Gita type, full of that fire of renunciation and of spiritual consciousness that Sri Krishna embodied and communicated to Arjuna in the verses of the Bhagavad Gita. Anyway, again, eventually Swami Turiyananda had to give in, so he accompanied Swami Vivekananda to California. Actually, he didn't. They started on the train together. Swamiji was getting off at Chicago. Swami Turiyananda went on to California. Anyway, that is the sort of how this, the genesis of this idea of that there should be an ashrama, there should be a place of spiritual practice, and how to make that happen. And probably is because the people here in San Francisco showed such great interest in Swami Vivekananda's teachings and actually formed themselves, requested the Vedanta Society to be established, that the teaching should be continued, the teachers should be sent from India to continue this work. Probably that great enthusiasm, that great dedication gave, Swami Vivekananda the conviction that these people were serious. So the Swami Turiyananda came here, and within a few days they were ready to start for the ashrama. Now the ashrama had nothing except one or two small cabins. So everything would have to be provided. But within a few days of his arrival in San Francisco, they were ready to go. Nowadays, it takes us several months of planning to even organize a little retreat in Shanti Ashrama. But in those days, somehow there was enough power and energy behind it that it really got established literally in a matter of a few days, 1 or 2 weeks, and they were on their way. Now, what were they trying to accomplish there? Now, to decide that, and since Swami Turiyananda was supposed to be a monk of the Gita type, it is good to look at the Gita and see what is the emphasis that he might have placed upon this new work of establishing an ashrama in a desolate part of the southern part of the Bay Area, and in which there was no facilities or just the barest minimum of facilities. What was he trying to accomplish? What was he trying to teach? So of course, they had scriptural classes. They studied Shankara's Viveka Chudamani. They studied Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga lectures on the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. So we have some idea of what they actually studied there. But what would the leader of such an organization, what would he have emphasized? Now, Sri Ramakrishna said that he was a monk of the Gita type. So what does the Bhagavad Gita emphasize? And there are 2 verses in the Bhagavad Gita that I think illustrate or emphasize the whole message of the Gita. Of course, to say that anything really any one or two or three or five verses really emphasize the teaching of the Gita is a very bold statement that one should make only very, very tentatively, because 18 chapters, each chapter is called a yoga. All the different aspects of the struggle to attain that spiritual consciousness are discussed in the Bhagavad Gita in a very elaborate, very attractive, very poetic way. It's written in poetry, and when you translate it, it's difficult to put the translation in poetic form. But the initial one is all in metrical form. It's a very, just the recitation of those verses is tremendously inspiring. Just then to meditate on the meaning is even more, elevating. It is considered really one of the, at least as far as popular consumption, popular view or acceptance is concerned, it is probably the main scripture. And it is, one could say, since Swami Turiyananda was supposed to be the essence, the essential, or the goal, or to exemplify the goal that the Gita is trying to teach. So would you say are the main teachings of the Gita, to give you an idea? And probably if we take the first teaching and the last teaching, there seems to be a range between those two that seems to really encompass everything else within the Gita, at least in outline, very outlined form. Now, the first teaching verse, of course, it starts with the story, Arjuna's need for the teaching and all that. That's the first chapter. But if one starts with the first teaching verse, which is chapter 2, verse 12, Natvevaham jatunasam, is the, that astounding statement is, like an explosive, challenge that is thrown at us. It means, indeed, there was no time when I was not. That statement itself really emphasizes the essence of Vedanta and the essence of the Gita just by itself. That's just one part of one verse. Na tu eva aham jatam nasam, na asam. No, there was no time when I was not. That is a statement. In other words, our own essence is an eternal reality. Time itself is within that reality. So, natvevaham jatunasam. There was never a time when I was not. Then it goes on, the next statement, natvam, nor you. Neme janadhipaha, nor all of these people assembled around us. Of course, they were, the story of the Bhagavad Gita is on a battlefield, and there were people, there's vast complications. So none of this applies to every phenomenon. There was never a time when it was not. Now, the body is obvious. At some time the body came into existence, And at some other time, the body decays and dies, and that's the end of that particular manifestation. But that's not the end of experience. That experience comes again, that the thing that drove, that impelled, that forced our experience, any one of our experiences. At the end of that experience, when it ends, it leaves a track, it leaves a trace, it leaves a powerful force to generate another existence. So the essence of ourselves is not that which comes and goes. This body is not the essence of us. Nor is it the essence, not tvam neme jandipaha, it is not your essence, it is not anybody's essence. Everything that we perceive comes and goes. It is born, it grows, and so forth. There's 6 levels of birth, growth, and then decay, and so forth. Finally, it disappears. And we think because we don't see it anymore, therefore that's the end of the story. But that's not what religion really tells us. It's not what the Bhagavad Gita tells us. You came here to fulfill a certain purpose, or you found yourself here wanting to fulfill a certain purpose, but before you can complete it, the 100 years we're allotted are over, and we march off the face of this earth and without having accomplished really the essence of what we wanted to accomplish. So again we appear on this earth to try again to realize that. So this goes on. Now, how long does it go on? Is there any end to this, or is this our eternal doom, you could say? That neither I or we or any of these kings of men or any of these people around us, there was never a time when our essence never existed. The body comes and goes, but the essence that is the reality of each one of us does not change. It is unchangeable. There is in this world something which is unchangeable. There's a reality that's at the core of everything that changes. That reality is unchangeable. That is the essence of religion. That is what we want to get. When we find ourselves identified with that, then this coming and going, there's no need for it anymore. We are that. We become that, which we basically have been since time immemorial. So that is the beginning, the first verse of the Gita. The very first part of the first verse tells you that. The last of the teaching verses comes in chapter 18. 18 verse 66. Sarvadharman parityajya mam ekam sharanam vraja. So sarvadharman, dharma means the things that guide our life, the thing that holds us from the root church, something that supports, holds us together. That our essence. Each one of us has a core reality that we are built upon. That is our central core. And we're trying to realize that. Each time we come to this world, we're trying to realize something. We're trying to achieve something. We're looking at something. So all these external things that we're looking at, that we're wanting to achieve, those things that come and go, those things that change, they're formulations that we have made of ourselves. I want this, I want to experience that, I want to. All of these things that give up all of those. In other words, give up the smallness that we are concentrated upon. And then what? Mamekam sharanam vraja. Me alone. Me is Sri Krishna alone. That is to say, Sri Krishna not identified as a limited being giving a lecture on to a disciple Arjuna, but that which is the real me of Krishna, the essence, the substance, the core, the unchangeable reality. Everything revolves around the idea that at the heart of everything that changes, there is a core, a truth, a foundation which is unshakable. Unshakable because it was never created. It was never created, and because it was never created, it can never be destroyed. At the heart of every manifestation, at the heart of every being, of every reality, there is an unchangeable consciousness, we call it. You can give it other names: Satchid Ananda, conscious existence, consciousness, bliss. Bliss because it is a totally undisturbed state. When are we most blissful? Every day we are most blissful in what we call deep sleep state. And what are we aware of in the deep sleep state? Nothing that we can identify. In other words, we're not aware of anything external. We're not aware of anything external. But that internal consciousness is unshakable and unchangeable. So when we're no longer aware of the external, that means that we are aware of nothing. No, it means we're aware of that which we really are, the essence that we really are. So that is the first verse of the Gita. The last verse of the Sarvadharman Parityaja, give up all these various searchings here and there. Sarvadharman Parityaja, Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. Take refuge in that one reality alone, that consciousness which is unchanging, which we call God, which we call the infinite, the eternal, whatever name we give it. At the heart of everything that changes, there is a reality which does not change. It's like if you're looking at a motion picture. You're looking at the movie. Everything about the movie is constantly changing. But that movie would be would not be seen at all if the screen weren't there. And what is the role of the screen as far as the movie is concerned? The screen is not at all connected with the movie. But without its presence, the movie would not be seen. So without the presence of God, without the presence of the infinite reality, nothing in this universe would be experienced at all. So the message is, take refuge in that which does not change. Take refuge in the infinite and the eternal, the unchangeable. And the unchangeable is described as Sat Chit Ananda. It not only does it exist, Sat, it is existence itself. Chit, it is consciousness itself. Ananda, it is bliss itself. That is as much as you can say about it. So this is what it means to be a sadhu of the Gita type, which Swami Turiyananda was described as being by Sri Ramakrishna. And that is what he lived, and that is how he taught. And that is, in that state, he lived at our ashrama, at our Shanti ashrama, which he established, which was the first retreat, Vedanta retreat, that was established after the advent of Sri Ramakrishna in the West. So and Swami Turiyananda lived in that consciousness and was fully devoted to that consciousness. Sri Ramakrishna called him a sadhu of the Gita type. This was his very nature. So when he lived at Shanti Ashrama, this is what he taught, this is what he brought into existence. This is what one tries to perceive in our spiritual practices and in our devotions. Whatever we practice, we try to find that reality. So the different yogas, karma yoga, bhakti yoga, jnana yoga, raja yoga. So karma yoga, whatever you do. And one of the verses is the Gita, whatever you do, whatever you offer in sacrifice, all of that offer unto me. Offer means merge it or see the infinite, the eternal reality in it. Whatever we do under all circumstances should be pervaded by the consciousness of that which does not change. We have to deal with the changeable, that is our life. This is from the beginning to the end, this is what we need to do. But if our problem is we're totally worried about the results of what we do, what we should do, what we want to do, what we hope to do, what we may not have done, what we ought to have done, all of that. It's all a conjugation of the verb to do, which is, someone once described this as karma yoga, as the conjugation of the verb to do. And but within while doing all that, what is an ashrama? An ashrama is a place where many things are done. It's not a place where you simply sit there and quietly absorb yourself in the infinite and the eternal. That sort of thing is not that easy to do, to achieve. An ashrama is a conjugation of the verb to do. I shall do, I have done, I may do, I could do, I might have done. It's all a conjugation of the verb to do. But within that which, everything that is done against the background which does not change. The infinite and the eternal is the reality that we try to see in everything that is constantly changing. And our trouble is that we see the changing and as being devoid of anything definite, anything firm, anything steady, anything eternal, anything unchanging. As long as we see the changing only, then we have, yes, hopes and dreams, but we also have regrets and fears. But an ashrama is a place where you do what needs to be done, realizing that there's a consciousness which does not change, which is the core, the heart, the essence of everything that does change. There will be no lecture on next Sunday, May 1st, because of the special program on Saturday, April 30th. On Sunday evenings, Swami Tattvamayananda holds an online class at 6 p.m. on Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. The Zoom and YouTube links are available on our website's homepage as well as in the monthly email bulletin. On Wednesday evenings, we have special Vespers with meditation at 7:30 p.m. in this auditorium. There will be no class this Friday at the Old Temple because of Saturday's program. Class will resume the following week on May 6th. Our annual pilgrimage to Shanti Ashrama will take place next Saturday, April 30th. And of course, that was the excuse for giving this talk this morning. The all-day program begins at 11 a.m. and will end at 3:45 p.m. So that, because it is quite some distance away from the various centers in the Bay Area, so the program has to end early to enable people to reach their homes early enough. The program will consist of worship, devotional music, special displays, and a tour of the ashrama. All are welcome to attend. Programs are available in the lobby. At present, the bookshop and library remain closed, and childcare is still not currently available during lectures and worship. Your cooperation is being fully vaccinated, wearing a mask, and maintaining 6 feet of distance is greatly appreciated. If you would like to make an offering, a collection plate will be available on the cart at the door as you exit. There is also a mounted offering box near the auditorium door in the foyer. You and your friends are cordially invited to attend all of our services. After the lecture, there will be a question and answer session in Vivekananda Hall, and all are welcome. Om Dhyau Shanti, Antariksham Shanti, Prithivi Shanti, Apo Shanti, Roshadaya Shanti, Vanaspataya Shanti, Vishwe Deva Shanti, Brahma Shanti, Sarvam Shanti, Shantireva Shanti, Sama Shantiredhi. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om, peace is in heaven, peace is in the sky, on the earth, and in the waters. The herbs, the plants, and the trees are full of peace. The gods are peaceful. Everything in the universe is pervaded by peace. May that infinite universal peace enter our soul and being. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all.